Well, hundreds of projects in Australia's $120 billion infrastructure investment program are set to be reviewed. The Minister, Catherine King, has accused the coalition of clogging the pipeline, claiming the government will clean up the mess they left behind. Joining me now is the Nationals leader, David Littleproud. I do note, Mr Littleproud, that this review is after the budget. Is it fair enough that this government should, review this list of projects and perhaps pull some out that they don't deem worthy?
Well, this is after their second budget. You've got to ask what Catherine King's been doing for the last 12 months. The reality is this is a pipeline of infrastructure investment over 10 years, one in which was going to the productivity of our economy. And for this to come out now is a smokescreen for, again, this Labor government to rip infrastructure out of regional Australia. We lost $23 billion in the last budget, and they were coming back for regional Australia again. And when they can put $2.2 billion into the Melbourne rail link without a business case, without it going to Infrastructure Australia, which the Prime Minister promised he would, you've got to ask the question about the sincerity of Catherine King and this government. This is about setting up a budget that regional Australia will pay. And just so everyone understands, everyone will pay, because you might wipe the sweat off the brow, you're living in a capital city going, oh, that's good because we'll get all our urban infrastructure. But if the road and rail infrastructure isn't right to get product from a paddock to your plate or onto a ship, then the bills aren't paid and your cost of living goes up. So regional Australia is saying the infrastructure spend that we had was one about the productivity of our nation, about paying the bills and driving down your cost of living, of getting product to you quicker and more efficiently. We don't have that now, and that's about making sure you have priorities. And this government priority is all about election winning in the cities and forgetting about the important role that the 30% of Australians that live outside a capital city play in our nation's economy.
Yeah. This is about spending taxpayers' money in an efficient way as well, would you agree? Now, I see some quotes from the Minister in the paper this morning. We'll hear from her a little bit later. She says, well, this needs to be about genuine nation-building projects. What does that mean to you? What's a genuine nation-building project?
Well, things like inland rail, things like the roads of strategic importance, beef roads that were getting product from a pit to a port or from a paddock to your plate. That's about growing the productivity of our nation, and that is the $120 billion that we put over a 10-year span to make sure that we were growing our pie here in this country with the infrastructure that support the supply chains, not just to pay the bills but to reduce the cost of living. And this is a smokescreen for the Minister now to come around, particularly when you look at that Melbourne rail link, and the reports out of the Victorian Auditor General were scathing. And in fact, they're predicting that this project could blow out to $250 billion, just in addition to the initial $2.2 billion that the Albanese government gave without any scrutiny whatsoever. So you take this with a grain of salt. Let's have a transparent process as we did. The $120 billion that we were going to spend on dams, on roads, on rail was all about productivity, and it was all about making sure there was proper governance. And this government is all about blame rather than taking responsibility. When your inflationary pressures are going up, and you only have to see the figures out today, our core inflation is the highest of G7 nations. That just goes to show that this government's decisions are having a big impact on your cost of living.
Yeah, okay, so you're going to meet with farmers today in Melbourne about this rewiring the nation. What are you going to tell them? Because didn't we hear from AEMO just last week that this is a crucial project and billions of dollars need to be spent upgrading these transmission lines so they can take renewable energy because that's where our energy market is going?
Well, I'm going to Charlton out listening to farmers who'll lose thousands of hectares of productive landscape, that we'll lose thousands of hectares of native bushland to put transmission lines up when there are alternatives to this. And we're saying that AEMO's model of upgrading this to 500 kilowatt is power lines isn't necessary. What you want to do is have your renewables close to the source of where it can be distributed. And the best way, if you look at renewables, particularly for solar, is household. We're going to spend close to $8 billion just on this part of rewiring this country. 28,000 new kilometres of new transmission lines across this country that this government's going to spend the first tranche $25 billion. And guess who pays for that?
Yeah.
That's you, because half your energy bill at the moment is distribution. So you can do this with...
Just going back to AEMO, just last week we heard that, you know, there needs to be this investment. It's about long-term planning.
We think they're wrong.
You think AEMO's wrong?
So this is where we think that there are alternative options, and in fact even met this morning with a professor from Melbourne University who is articulating a more succinct model that will not need these transmission lines. We want renewables to work, and if you do that and look at where you can make that investment without putting more transmission lines, taking away agricultural landscape that takes away your food security and pushes up your cost of living. You can do this sensibly with the money that we're going to spend, because ultimately you're going to have to pay for that. And you can also look at the sensible solution that we're saying is that where we have existing coal-fired power stations, then we should look to the emerging technology of small-scale modular nuclear to plug them in to the existing places where coal-fired power stations are that will transition away. Wouldn't that make common sense, that you don't need to build 28,000 kilometres of new transmission lines if you look to the new technology, and particularly when Canada and the United States are now estimating that the cost of generation of an SMR is around $70 a megawatt hour. Our average price, the Australian Energy Regulator has said this on the East Coast is around $107. So why wouldn't we use some common sense, peak over the Pacific, not spend a cent, but have the conversation, let the market decide. Chris Bowen shouldn't be yelling and screaming at the Australian people that it's the most costly form of energy. Let the market decide. Let's get rid of the barriers, and if it is $70 a megawatt hour, we can firm up renewables, we can make renewables work without having to put in 28,000 kilometres of new transmission lines that you're going to pay for.
All right, David Littleproud, good to have you on the show, as always. Thanks so much.
Thanks.